Welcome everybody to Buying into Brooklyn. My name is Victoria Alexander. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, just as people join the chat, join the call. So you can ask any questions you have in the chat. Farah is going to put something there now so you can see it pop up. We'll be sharing relevant links throughout the presentation, and you'll be emailed the recording of this. So go ahead and share it with anybody that is an important decision maker that you want to educate about the process, as well as a copy of our ebook that we've written, Buying into Brooklyn, but also is relevant to Manhattan. And you can listen to the workshop also on Spotify if you don't want to see our beautiful faces. And you can connect this with all of us afterwards if you have any questions you don't want to ask here. We also do a women-owned business blog series for women-owned businesses. We focus a lot on Brooklyn-owned businesses. So if women-owned Brooklyn business, please have them reach out to us. We have a little link to, we'll share about that as well. So I'm Victoria. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm I started 19 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers in New York City. And I'm going to be introducing my co-presenters here. But what is the job of a real estate agent in this process? I'm your matchmaker, I'm your therapist, I'm your sounding board. I'm whatever it takes to get you into your Brooklyn home whenever and help you reach your goals on your timeline that we outline together and prepare you for the emotional and financial roller coaster of the home buying process. And my little job is to just guide you through this process with almost 20 years of experience here in the Brooklyn market and to help you get your first home and make you a homeowner. And that is to protect you from your own instincts sometimes and help you get out of the way of reason and help you get you to the closing table. Agents are usually in New York City. The way that it's structured is a lot of the time are paid by the seller's agent as the selling side. But there are cases where that is not the case. So we should discuss those scenarios, but usually that is how that it's organized because the sellers are enticed to have deals with representation on both sides to get the deal to actually come to the closing table because they need educated buyers and you don't get that without agents on both sides. So it's your best interest to make sure that you have a team of people that are going to help guide you and share their expertise with you. Speaking of expertise, I'm going to let Talia introduce herself.
Great. Thank you so much, Victoria. So I'm Talia Bishani with Tab Law Firm. I am a residential real estate attorney. I have been practicing for 16 years. I close within the city, so Manhattan, all of the boroughs, as well as Westchester and Long Island. I handle all co-ops, condos, single multifamily, new construction properties. And the three pillars of my practice are speed, communication, and responsiveness. So I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. I do a lot of hand-holding along the way. I'm a solo practitioner with a great team. So I have one associate and two paralegals. My office is in 39th and Broadway, which means you get very hands-on, specified service tailored to your needs from start through finish, every step of the way.
Great, thank you. John, introduce yourself.
Sure, yeah, I'm John Lundholm. I am with Quintessential Mortgage Group. We're an independent broker shop, so we work with a whole bevy of different lenders and investors to find the right loans and find a good set of different structures, options, and the best rates and pricing as well. I've been doing this for quite a while myself, and my operation is always very similar to what was previously said, in that I like to focus very much on the experience of it. Home buying can be a very intense process, particularly in New York. And so I spend a tremendous amount of time. I do weekly check-in calls. I do routine follow-ups. I am very responsive. My team and I do our best to handhold everyone through it and to not just be happy, but to be so happy that they run out and tell lots of other people to give us a call as well. So I always tell people, help me help you. Ask as many questions as you want. Let me walk you through the whole process. I spend a ton of time and resources on making sure that I have the answers to your questions and that I can explain everything well, handhold you through it, and get you to the other side nice and quickly and efficiently and happy.
Yeah, and that's what you guys want. That's what we want. We want three professionals. You want what I call the dream team. You want to make sure that you are interviewing these people, that you feel comfortable talking to them, that you can listen to their advice, that it's actually answering your questions, not giving you an answer that you don't understand. You want to make sure that you can feel like you like and trust them. This is somebody you're going to be spending a lot, these three people are people you're going to be spending a lot of time with. So make sure that you feel comfortable working with them and that you're going to want to you're going to be able to listen to their advice and listen to what they're saying, and that you trust that they have relationships in the industry and have been doing this long enough that they can actually guide you through this process. You don't want to hire your cousin that just got his real estate license or your friend that is a divorce lawyer. You want somebody that is New York City specific expertise. It is really important that you vet who you're working with, and that is why we assemble these workshops to help you get acquainted with us as a team, and also to understand like what kind of questions you should be asking so you're prepared. Because yes, of course we would love to work with you, but the most important thing is that we're preparing you so that you don't end up in one of those nightmare real estate scenarios where you didn't hire the right people and ended up having stressful headache of apartment buying or selling experience. I've worked with both of these team members, and I think that you're going to do your own homework, but I think that you're in really great hands if you're working with anybody that Realty Collective has had in the Buying into Brooklyn classes. First slide then is building your dream team and education. We talked about the importance, a little bit about why buying now, but I would say interest rates are starting to come down. And the first thing really people get really excited and they want to look online and go to open houses and do all those things. But I always tell people the first thing you should really be doing is calling and getting your mortgage pre-approval and understanding what your buying power is, and not to just get on Street Easy and get sucked into the perusing of listings all the time. John, I'm going to ask you, like, where do you really start with people? Because that's where I like, somebody calls me and the first thing I'm saying is, are you pre-approved? Let's get your finances together, because I want them, if we're going out to look at listings, being able to actually follow through on putting an offer if they fall in love with it. I don't want to, it's sometimes people don't listen to that, of course. But so tell me what that process looks like when you're having the first call.
Sure. So I follow a very specific process. I like to try to make sure to check all of the right boxes and do everything the same way every time, so that it's very consistent and it's reliable and steady, because there's so many questions. I like to tell people, when you're buying a home, think of the last time you bought a couch or a television or a car or something, and how much your stomach flipped over when you're spending a couple of bucks, and then multiply that 10 or 100x and add to it a change in lifestyle because you're moving from one home to another, and it's a whole lot. So having everything really consistent, really steady is very critical. So what I like to do is I'll start out and point out to people that the pre-approval not only sets your expectations so that you're not looking for something that's out of your price range, but I also come across people who are overly conservative and are disappointed by what they're finding. And when we run through a pre-approval for them, they realize they could spend even a little bit more than they thought. And that changes their search completely. So the pre-approval puts you in the right spot and helps you to understand where is a good price point and what can move things around. It also, though, puts the sellers at ease, because if the seller is having people come to their property, and right now there's often multiple visits, multiple bids, they need a way to figure out who they want to go into contract with. And so you want to show them that you're a serious buyer. You want to show them that you've run through the numbers, that you're well qualified, and that will help you to win the bids. So that's my spiel on why to do the pre-approval. As far as how we go about it, what I'll do is the first call I'll have with someone will be between 10 and 15 minutes. We'll touch on a couple of key questions, and then I will send them off with a little bit of homework to gather some info and data for me. And then we'll set up a second call that's a half an hour, where we'll set up their clear mortgage plan. We'll run through the purchase price, the down payment, the cash needed for the closing, expectations around their monthly bill, what their mortgage payment will look like, what their other housing expenses will look like, so that they have a really good handle on what they can expect going forward. And then I will give them a couple of notes on the search to get them underway nice and comfortably. And then from there, we do a weekly follow-up call, just a 2-minute check-in. How's everything going? Any luck? Anything new and exciting? Any updates needed, etc. So we cover all the basics nice and succinctly. I don't try to take up too much of their day. Everybody's busy, particularly in New York. And just keep it nice and focused, get them the information they need, and get them on their way.
I have to unmute myself. And I think that just goes back to the showing how serious you are. And when you have competing offers, other people are like, "Well, we're still interviewing lawyers." And I'm like, that's why I always say on day one, you should start talking to lawyers and figuring out who you want to work with, because leaving that blank on the deal sheet doesn't help anybody. It only helps you to have somebody that has a track record in the industry, and that people are like, another broker is going to be like, "Oh, I've worked with Talia. We just did a deal together. But she was on my side. Let's make sure that I know what kind of lawyer she is. I don't have to take a gamble." But these other people that have an offer in, their lawyer, I've never heard of, it's too much of a gamble. Let's, go with the offer. They're neck and neck to make sure that these people are picking somebody that we know will be a good partner. Because I know that it seems like we're all at odds because the buyer and seller are trying to get the best deal. But really, people are trying to make the smoothest transaction for everybody that's part of the deal. They want to avoid, it's a very complicated, stressful scenario. And so we're trying to remove all of the roadblocks, remove all of the stressors, and make this as easy as possible. So that's why it's important to be interviewing the lawyers, the mortgage broker, your buyer's broker at the gate, and pick somebody that you like and trust. So that deal sheet, when they go out, you already know who that lawyer is. So when you're talking to clients, Talia, what are the first things you talk about with them in the first meeting?
Sure. So whenever I have a new client call or consultation, I basically go over the next steps and I describe the entire process so they know exactly what they are up against moving forward throughout the deal. I think it's really important to have transparency and full disclosure so that there's no surprises. So my first question to them is, what are you purchasing? Are you purchasing a co-op, condo, or a house, single or multifamily, with or without tenants? Because based on their response and the property type, that will determine the process, because each property type has a very unique buying process. So it's important that they understand the steps and the requirements throughout the deal. So that's the first question. Then from there, I say, are you getting financing or paying all cash? And that will also determine how quickly we can close and what type of contingencies are in place. And then also whether it's a regular resale or if it's a sponsor sale, which means a new development or a new construction, because again, that also has a slew of details that attach to it. And then I basically describe my services to them. So based on the property that they are purchasing, I say, okay, once the deal sheet goes out, we normally have 5 days to complete our due diligence. That is when I will review the co-op or condo building. So I go over the offering plan, the financials, the bylaws, the board minutes, just to make sure the building itself is financially healthy, no major issues, no litigation, no major capital repairs or improvements. Of course, I share all information with the client. I also prepare an estimated closing cost breakdown. So depending on what their mortgage amount is, what their purchase price is, if there's mansion tax, if it's new construction sponsor sale, I put together a nice spreadsheet of their estimated closing costs. And then I let them know that I will also review and negotiate the contract with the seller's attorney. That's part of my job, to ensure that the contract is legally correct. All necessary provisions and protections are included. And once everything checks out and we are good to proceed, at that point, I will let them know that I'll set up another call with them to go over the terms of the contract, at which point they will sign via DocuSign, so electronic signatures, and they will need their 10% deposit funds liquid and ready to wire. And then as far as my fee, I charge a flat fee. I'm a flat fee of $3,500 that covers everything start through finish. Half is collected up front, so $1,750 up front. They will sign my retainer agreement and they can pay me via Venmo, Zelle, check, or wire. And then the other half is due at closing. And if for whatever reason we don't close, let's say maybe it's an unfortunate co-op word turned down or the financing falls through, I don't charge them the other half. So I only keep the first half to cover my time on the file, and they only pay me the second half upon closing. So that is my initial call with every client.
That's a great initial call. That's a lot of information. Wow, that's really impressive that you go over in such detail with everybody the whole process. I think that's really such a unique thing that not a lot of lawyers offer. And I think that it's refreshing to hear. And I like how upfront about everything you are too. I like that you're leading with that.
Yeah.
So those are the first calls you have with the most important people that are part of this transaction for you. So those are, that's where you want to start, is getting your team aligned. And then you might need other people, like you might need a contractor, you might need an inspector, but anybody on this call is going to have resources and recommendations for you. So just know that you're going to have other wealth of information for us to ask, oh, who's my favorite electrician or who's my favorite inspector? I have a list of people for you to then call, just like you would if you were like, who's your lawyers? I have a list of lawyers, for you to call, and I want you to pick the one that's right for you. I don't know who that is. I don't know if I'm the right buyer's broker for you. Everybody's different, and we want you to help reach your goals, and only you can figure out what that looks like. I can just present you with the different options. So where do you usually start? So you've assembled your team, and now you want to start looking at things, right? And so you and I are going to have a conversation about what you're looking for. And just know that everything has changed, and that the internet has made it so all of the listings are on the internet, and that there really isn't a lot of things that come on the market or come on that are available, or people are thinking of selling, that you won't be able to know about. There are some strategies, like if I wanted to only live on Garfield Place in a co-op, there's only 3 co-op buildings on Garfield Place, how we could strategize to find somebody, shake the trees, and maybe somebody would want to sell there if that you were really gung-ho about that little thing. When like this summer, a broker wrote to me and said, hey, we sold the house 2 doors down, and we're going to get the other house. Do your clients that came to this and didn't get it are interested in that? Those sort of things happen. So it is good to like work with one agent, and then those opportunities will come back around. Those are the sort of things that to just know about what's happening when you're like, all these agents are writing to me. They wrote and they offered me this listing. Oh, should I be working with them? No, work with one agent. That's why, and one lawyer and one mortgage broker. Find who you like, and then you're going to stick to your guns. So we're going to create a buying strategy, how you want to look for properties, what your price point is, co-op or condo, understanding the options associated, the different things associated with buying a condo or a co-op. There's restrictions in co-op about renting. So if you're like, we might have to move out of the city at some point, so we really need to be able to rent it in the future because my job is bi-coastal or our family is in a different city, you want to understand what you're buying and what the restrictions are. So once we've gone over that and what amenities you need, if you need to be by a park, if you need to have new construction because you need to have a washer dryer unit, and co-ops usually don't let you have a washer dryer unit, the different amenities that are important to you, and what neighborhoods then offer those kind of properties. Like you're not going to get a lot of new construction in Park Slope. In Gowanus, yes, but not Park Slope. If you want new construction, Williamsburg might be an option for you. So understanding what typology of architecture and buildings are available in different neighborhoods is also something to consider. And just listening to the education about that. What else? So I went over the closing costs. They're also cheaper for co-ops and condos. So understanding what you'll need to have for closing costs, funds for when you close is important. So making sure you have the savings and everything put away for that. And then really understanding what your buying power is, which you would talk about with John, so that you're not looking at things you can't afford. A lot of people are stretching themselves, and then what's happening now in the market, things are going over asking, and then people are getting frustrated and disappointed because it was at the top of the market of our budget, and then everything went over. Things that have been sitting on the market, you have a lot more leverage and might be able to do that with properties that are not just listed and having the open house this weekend and then getting 10 offers on Monday morning. So where do you search? We set up an internal search for you. So you get a database of all the brokers listings that are part of REBNY. Yeah, we skipped through all of that because we're just doing sort of the Q&A thing. But you can still look on Street Easy. I think they have a great user interface. And time you would just say, oh, we like these listings. Can we go see these this weekend? And we'd schedule everything. That's one of the things that like makes it less stressful, is that you just tell us when you're available, how you're going to be getting around, like bike or car, and what listings you want to see. And we'll organize the appointments for you. And I will come with you if you want me there. After a couple times, you might be sick. Let's see. Making an offer and negotiating. So usually we try to reach out to the lawyer and the mortgage broker and say, are there any red flags with these buildings to be aware of before we put in our offer? Sometimes we already know there's more than 50% of rentals in there, so financing is going to be challenging. There's all sorts of things that can come up and that they'll have insight on before we go down this path, because the last thing you want to do is find out some of this information after you're already in contract. If that turnaround can't happen right away, we still get the offer in because you want to stay competitive. It's important you put in a cover letter, you put in your pre-approval. You need the pre-approval. That's why I said you got to talk to John right away. And you put in an offer form. And then we think about, Talia was just talking about contingencies. You waiving contingencies, waiving your inspection. I always tell people get an inspection, but waive your inspection contingency. Financing contingency. You are going to waive that if you're paying all cash. What other scenarios would you do that? If you were madly in love with the place, you felt so confident about your finances that no matter what, you could make the deal happen and not worry about losing your down payment, because that's what you're risking if you waive your financing contingency and then can't close. The sellers can keep your deposit amount, which is the 10% that Talia mentioned. So where do you think that buyers really need the most help with in this process? And I'm gonna leave that open to you guys. What do you think that as we're going through and thinking about the challenges that are having now with the high interest rates and how tight inventory has been, I really see like buyers in the under 1.5 market are having the hardest time because inventory is so tight.
Yeah, I think that because the inventory is very tight, and also people are getting in their head that they want to find their dream home, so they get very particular on what kind of homes they want to find, and it pairs into a little bit of an emotional kick that they finally find this one property that they really like, and then they put in a bid and then they don't win the bid. And so one of the things that I will generally talk with people about up front is saying, I'm seeing people putting 2, 3, 4, 5 bids before they get an accepted bid. So don't feel like you have to find the exact perfect property. Find a property that you like, take a shot at it. You don't have to buy it. If you get an accepted bid, you're not in contract. There's nothing binding about it. You can rethink it later, but open the conversation, put in a bid. And I think that once people get a little bit more comfortable with throwing a bid out there on a property or 2 or 3, it starts to really hit a little bit more. But that first stretch before they find that first property that they want to bid on sometimes is a little bit challenging.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I always encourage people to get an offer in. Like they're like, oh, I'm like, don't overthink this. Just get an offer in. Even we're probably not going to be that competitive. Put in a softball offer, but let's go through the process, because that education and from going that experience helps prepare them for the next one. What that might be their dream property, and so they're better prepared for the next one going through the motions.
The other thing too that I'll point out to people is that I find at least 2 most common ways that I see people winning properties. One is if you throw money at it, if you bid more than everybody else.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, you want to go into it and say, hey, I'm going to pay as much as I need to pay. That's, I don't know, at least for me. The other strategy that I see win more often than not is being first and being fast. So if you go and see a place on a Sunday and you really like it, don't feel like you got to wait until Wednesday to bid. You can bid on a Sunday, you can bid on a Monday. The quicker you get in that bid, the more likely that you're the first one in. And once the seller starts wedding to you, and of course, Victoria, I defer to you on a lot of this too, but
wood.
I gotta remove this person.
But once you get the bid and the seller starts to consider you and think of you as their buyer, then everyone who comes in after has to be better than you in some way, shape, or form. They either think that they're going to be more likely to close, or they think they're going to pay more money, or they have to beat your offer in order to pull you off. So if you can be fast, you save yourself a couple of bucks and increase your chances.
Yeah.
I also
I
think,
go ahead, Talia. No.
I think a lot of it comes down to creative negotiation skills and tools, because I think if you can be creative with the offer and let the seller know that you're willing to waive certain contingencies, or you can come up a bit in price and negotiate a seller's concession to help cover closing costs, which means you can finance your closing costs into the purchase price. That helps. I think maybe negotiating a purchase SEMA where, splitting the savings 50-50 with the seller would help. I've also seen clients say, look, I will purchase the property as is. I won't ask for any repair requests so long as the repairs don't exceed $10,000. Obviously, I still want a right to inspection. I'm not going to nickel and dime you, seller. I'm going to waive the first 10 grand of any repair issues, or I'm willing to waive the mortgage contingency because I know I will be approved. I just need a funding contingency to make sure that the building will be approved by my lender. I know a lot of buyers that go up against all cash deals maybe come in higher than all cash, but waive the contingency because they've already been underwritten by their bank and they're just waiting for a signed contract and an appraisal, in which case we just ask for a funding contingency based on the building, not so much based on the borrower, and sellers really like that as well. So I think coming in with those creative negotiation tools and tactics will really help win over a deal. Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you. Sorry.
No, thanks for telling me. I do that. I just don't want there to be background noise when somebody else is speaking. But I think that's also true is getting your offer in first. I think there's an emotional trigger that happens for sellers and the first people, and especially if they see, I think that really it plays out in so many scenarios where the new buyers are the sellers when they first bought the property. And I think that really pulls on some heartstrings. And if you're the first offer and you demonstrate that they're similar in that way, then they feel like connected to you for being the first offer as well. So I think that's a good strategy. I think waiving the contingencies, obviously putting more, offering more if there's going to be cash offers, but writing a compelling letter and being quick about it and saying, listen, if you want us to close fast or close slow, like we are willing to work on your timeline, work on the things that you need to reach because we're flexible and like we're willing to wait. And I think that showing that you're, willing to work with them just makes you feel like, okay, these are people that are going to be easy to work with moving forward. So I think those are all great tips on how to make sure you become the winning bid. I think it's really hard though now, like a property that I just put an offer in that like I have sold 2 apartments in the building, and we even put like a very aggressive offer in, and it went like 100, it was a 600, it was 599, so it was 600,000. We put an offer in 120,000 over asking, and it went for more than that. I think it went for 140, maybe 50 over asking. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I really thought for sure, like, I was like, we're being the most aggressive. We're being the most, and I could not imagine anybody else like with the intel and that they were doing, but they did. So good for that seller and good for the buyer that got it. But it's been highly competitive, especially in this lower price point, I think, because there's just so much less inventory. And so really making sure your offer stands out. The other thing you do is put more money down and borrow family, figure out where you can get it for. But if you can demonstrate like, hey, we're a solid and look how less risky we are because we're going to put down 30 or 40% and that we're not relying so much on the bank, I think that really bodes well for you as well. I think that makes a strong case for why you'd be a solid buyer because you're not.
I think this is also somewhere that having the right agent can come in really handy, is that if you're looking at properties and they're getting scooped up and it's hyper competitive, someone like Victoria might be able to point out another neighborhood or another market. If you're looking in Gowanus, maybe you should also look in Greenpoint, or all these different factors that can come into play. And there might be a limited number of properties for sale in one specific area, but if you can explore a bit more, and again, that's where I think the expertise is really super helpful.
Yeah, the thing that's my best expertise, so to speak, is get out of the race. It's like people constantly like to be in bidding wars or things that like just hit the market and they're like, okay, it's this Sunday, and then it flies off the market. I'm like, okay, why are like have you discounted this property that's been sitting on the market? People are assuming something's wrong with it because it's been on the market. I'm like, they just made the mistake of overpricing it, or they have a bad photo or something. Let's stop, let's rethink, let's go into the back and look at the things that are just sitting there and rethink them and go see them in person and see what they really look like, instead of just being like, oh, there's must be something wrong with them, they're still sitting on the market. They just didn't do a good job out the gate and didn't hit the market, and so now that's what every buyer thinks. But you can still get a great deal and leverage that that position to work for yourself. So I think that's the race is the hardest thing, because if there's only one property and there's 40 people show up at the open house, it's going to be a lot of broken hearts. And just take yourself out of that race and get into a different one.
And these are a lot of the things too that you don't know as someone who's a casual real estate person. You know, if you're not doing this all the time, you're not aware of these dynamics and these, and nor would you be, nor really could you be. But finding the right team where people are doing this all the time and seeing this day in and day out is tremendously helpful.
Yeah, I think that having the expertise and the relationships. I think if it was the broker that was at this property that also sold in this building that it sold twice in, it was a broker that just never really worked in Brooklyn. So I also didn't have my client didn't have the advantage of that it was a broker I know, because most of the time I know all the agents on all the listings. Like, we've just been doing this all so long. When an agent has a property on the market and my clients want to see it, I'm like, hey, so I haven't talked to you since in 2 weeks. Like, glad to see that other thing moved, and you have this rapport. And that's the same thing I was talking about with the lawyers. It's like, you want to see, okay, oh, I know that lawyer. Oh, we've done deals with that lawyer on the transaction. That's what I look when I'm representing the seller is, oh, this offer, they have these names on the deal sheet. I know this mortgage broker. I know this. Okay, I feel confident that they're in good hands, because you want to know that the clients are in good hands to get them through the process. Because there are so many deals. John, I've probably called you with like financing nightmares. It was like the other broker didn't realize, like, they only had a pre-qual. They didn't really have a pre-approval, and they misled us, and we let the other buyers go. And just the other brokers didn't know what they were doing. And there was like a tiny bit of that, but like, also, it's so hard. It's really so hard. It's when there's these red flags and you're stuck in this position with these people that are going to make the deal more complicated. People are going to leave money on the table and make it harder for your clients to actually get to where they need to go. So it's really important you hire professionals, experts that have been doing this a long time, and get their references, look them up online, look at their reviews. Like, those are important things. So I feel confident in all of that with my great Google reviews. I'm sure you guys have the same. What are the other things that people think about? So once we find the property, we get the bid and all that, after we're in contract, what are you guys, that's like really, so I'm doing most of the work before we get in contract, finding the property, helping them get their offers in, helping them negotiate, helping them like go back and forth about which property is an A or a B property, and should they put the offer in, and trying to them to find other options in other neighborhoods if we're not getting the offers because they're just not as competitive as the other buyers that are in that market with them. But once we're in contract, that's where you guys are really doing the underwriting's happening, the due diligence is happening. Let's talk about those two parts of the deal.
I'm really pushing things along on my end. I order the title report, I review and clear title. I'm pretty much the ringleader between management and the lender and the buyer, ensuring that everybody is moving forward smoothly, making sure the seller's attorney is doing their job on their end. It's really, a lot of it comes down to managing the file in the process, keeping everybody on the same timeline, managing expectations, and a lot of follow-ups and follow-throughs. If I don't hear back, if something comes up, or I'm trying to clear title, or if there's an open permit or violations, or an appraisal comes in low, whatever it may be, it's always about acting proactive and finding solutions. I definitely pride myself on being a problem solver. I'm a deal maker, not a deal breaker. So I like to ensure that we get to the closing table smoothly and efficiently. And a lot of attorneys maybe just check out and just leave everything to the buyer and the lender, but I'm very much on top of every deal. I have a flow chart that I send out to the client just so they know the next steps, like the outline. And I'm just constantly following up and checking in. Hey, is the appraisal back? Are we good? Are we at value? How's the board application coming along? Oh, our commitment due date under the contingency is September 15th. How are things looking? Do we have condo project approval, co-op approval? So it's just a lot of that management and the day-to-day following up with everybody who's involved in the deal to make sure everything's on point. And sometimes I'll have a lender that'll say, look, I'm still waiting on documents, or we still need XYZ. We haven't been able to submit the file to underwriting. So I'll reach out to my client and just say, hey, where do you think we're at with this? How quickly can you get it? Because a lot of times I establish that relationship and the rapport with the buyer. So they really trust me, which is super important. And they listen to me, which is great, because that's what it takes to get us to the closing table on time. And I say, look, it's really important that we stay in compliance with the terms of the contract. We don't want to be in default. We don't want to risk your deposit. So it's really important that you get XYZ. If I need to request an extension, I will, but let's really try and make this date happen, because if not, it's a domino effect. So a lot of it is just file management and staying on top of people. Yeah.
I would love to see that flow chart, by the way. Yeah, that's what I'm setting. Yeah, I'm setting reminders. Like, we use a project management tool. So I'm setting reminders for my client. This is when your appraisal needs to be in. And it's great, because then I'm like, I'm asking John, oh, okay, so did you order the appraisal? And if the client doesn't have paperwork, John's telling me, and I'm then following up so that we can keep everybody accountable and keep the deal and progress moving forward. Because I think timing, especially with co-ops, is really kills deals and kills things more stressful, especially there at the end when people are like, oh, I gave up my lease and all this other stuff. So I think that's super important. And I love to hear that. I love to hear that. So John, what's happening? We're in contract. Tell us about the underwriting process and what's happening on your end.
Sure. Similarly, it is a lot of communication and process and staying on top of things in the same way that I touch base with every pre-approval on Thursdays. I touch base with everybody who's in a live contract every Tuesday. And I touch base with not only the borrowers, but I also touch base with the attorneys and the real estate agents. So everybody knows what's going on. And by being in touch so routinely, and then we'll probably talk even more than that, I like to just absolutely bury you in communication. But by being that communicative, things don't get missed. You don't have to depend on a squeaky wheel in order to make sure that things keep moving. Every week I'm staying on top of it. Every week my team is on top of it. And we are not just working towards hitting a timeline, but we're working towards getting way in front of a timeline, because there are things that can come up. Every piece of financing, every property is slightly different. And so you want to leave room and make sure that all of the bases are covered that you can possibly cover. I have a very specific flow that I walk through as far as the paperwork. I have a very specific flow that I walk through as far as the underwriting. I have very specific timelines that I walk through with people. And that keeps 90% of the stuff at bay. And then there's probably another 5% of it that is a little bit of I've been doing this so long, I can see around the corners a little. You get that kind of experience where you can see things coming in a way because you've seen so many things before. And then the last 5% is just stuff that just comes out of the blue. And again, experience, and by giving yourself the time to fix things and to work within things, I like to come up with elegant solutions to problems to make sure that if things start to go off track, we get it right back on, we figure it out, we say, here's the 3 things we need to do based on this piece of information that just fell out of the sky. So again, just being really communicative, staying on a very specific schedule, and doing everything in half the time that it needs to be done so that you have that other half of the time as bonus. And listen, if you finish early, and everybody's even more happy.
Yeah, I think that sometimes clients don't understand like why we're trying to rush the things, but I think it's not rushing. We're trying, we're just driving. Like, we're trying to make sure that we're within the window of time that we need to be in, because there's a lot of things that are out of our control, right? Isn't it the worst? So we're just talking about these like flows and like all these variables of things that can happen. So I'm just going to give some real life examples so that people don't or understand and can put it into realistic terms. It's all happened to us. Like 2 weeks before we're supposed to close, we found out the building's underlying insurance policy is about to expire. And we're all scrambling to make sure the management company is updating it and get us a copy of it so that the loan can still close. There's all these little things that don't seem like a big deal, but that can really, imagine if that happened and you had locked your rate. So there's all these things we didn't get to talk about today, but there's so much more to talk about. So you've locked your rate and your rate expires, and then the buyer has to pay to extend their rate lock. And there's only a certain amount of time you can extend it. And then you'd have to relock. And what if rates went back up? So we're doing everything in our power to protect you from you putting more money on the table, from you getting more stress and more anxiety, and all these variables being out of our control, right? We want to control the scenario so it's the least amount of stressful. And that's why we're trying to keep you guys on track and try to avoid these headaches down the line.
And there's stuff, even just in the universe of like acts of God, you have, I remember a couple of years back, there was a hurricane in the fall, and they declared a federal disaster. And once you declare a federal disaster, then every loan needs every appraisal re-inspected. So we had people who are a week from closing, and the storm went through, didn't do any damage to the property, and all of a sudden we had to re-inspect with the appraisal. So there's things that can come up that you can't see coming, that you can't
Plan for it, yeah.
Yeah, and so the
So let's
more
plan
that
for
you
what
can
we
get
can
everything
plan.
done
Yeah,
early,
yeah.
the more that you can control what you can control, the better everything goes.
I want to take questions now because we're going to wrap up in 5-10 minutes at 9 minutes. So if there's anybody, I think there's a couple of people on the call here. So I want to give them an opportunity. You can either take yourself off mute or leave it in the chat to answer questions. And then we can talk. Oh, here we go. Great. Yeah. And you're coming on camera. I love that. You can take yourself off mute. Oh, nope. They decided not to ask any questions and they thought they were done. Or I was going to say we can talk about some of the things we missed, but we can just wrap it up then. There's going to be some things that we can dive into if you give us a call and you want to ask about rate lock with John, as we didn't get to talk about what's happening in the market right now. And I think that's a good one-on-one question to just talk about where you see the market going now that the feds are slowly trying to tick that number down. And what and anything else that you want to call and ask us for a one-on-one, because I think this is a good introduction to getting things started. But I think
A lot to talk
that,
about on rates.
yeah.
Not nearly the time.
And I'm sure there's a lot of just questions that people want to ask that they don't feel comfortable in front of everybody asking for. And so it's better to just start with the intro call and we'll take it from there. So if we're all good, I think then we're gonna, it's just after all that stuff happens and you're ready to close, you do a final walkthrough, you go to the closing table, you give all of your money, your hand hurts from signing, you get to get the keys. And what my biggest advice is, don't schedule your movers on the same day you're closing. It just adds an extra layer of stress. Please don't do that. And so I want to thank you guys. I wanted to say we're going to follow up with a copy of this recording to everybody that signed up and that joined us today. If you work with us, you get access to our project management tool that has the workflow, access to our backend database. It'll send you all the listings, our ebook we're going to send out to you, and some other resources. And then we're just a wealth of information. And I just lead with that education is the most important thing. And I want to educate people so they're empowered to make the right decision. And I do not take it personally if I'm not the right decision. I know that everybody is looking out for what is in their personality type and what their needs are. And so sometimes, but I think it's important to understand, are you best by text message, email? Let's understand what your communication needs are. We don't want to overwhelm you with communication, but we do want to be thorough in our communication and make you feel like you have us as your assets throughout this process, because that's what we really are. So I'm going to turn off to you guys. Any closing remarks before we wrap it up?
Oh, thank you. This was great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just thank you. I'm here to act as a resource, even if you don't have a deal on the table, if you just want any legal advice or get my opinion on anything or how to structure either purchases or partnership agreements or co-buying, whatever it may be, gift funds, whatever it may be, I'm happy to act as a resource. You can get my full contact info at tali360.com. You can connect with me there and reach out at your convenience. And thank you so much for having me today.
And we're going to email everybody out everybody's contact information. So, and it'll be in the YouTube notes. So thank you guys so much. Have a great afternoon. I'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Talk soon.
Bye.